If you went back 20 years, you can't say Google had came at this with evil intent. They didn't. They actually had noble intent. They were going to catalog the world's information and share it with the world. But they're a publicly held company and they have shareholders and they're held accountable. So monetization became a big word. And the only way to monetize all this data that Facebook and Google were collecting was an advertising model.
Welcome to the Inside Forbes Council's podcast. Each episode shares transformative insights and advice from members of Forbes Councils, a group of invitation-only communities for successful executives and entrepreneurs. This is Inside Forbes Councils.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen Ganoza. Welcome to Inside Forbes Councils. Today we have my interview with Erik Rind, CEO of ImagineBC. ImagineBC is a technology solutions company that believes that it is a steward of its users' data, not the owner. The company promotes peer-to-peer commerce within its collection of decentralized mobile applications. We discussed data privacy, how individuals can monetize their own data, and alternative methods for content creators to generate revenue. So Erik, you're the founder and CEO of ImagineBC. Let's just have you start off by telling us a little bit about ImagineBC and the work that you do.
Sure. So ImagineBC came into existence because a number of years ago, I got fairly dissatisfied with the activities in the marketplace regarding the monetization of personal information. It's hard to believe, but 2.5 years ago, that was not a discussion being had by anybody. Here, 2.5 years later, it's front and center, especially, Netflix just drops a documentary called Social Dilemma, and it's there in front of everybody. But 2.5 years ago, it wasn't. And we were playing around with blockchain technology, decided that the best way to utilize blockchain technology for our purposes was to share it with people and create an ecosystem where all individuals, all members of our ecosystem would receive fair value for their personal data and also for their creativity. And that's a big distinction with what we're doing. It's both personal data and creativity, and we act as a broker agent on their behalf. So that's pretty much what ImagineBC is after. Big job because you're taking on the big tech companies, but it's a crusade for us.
Okay, good. That's great. I want to unpack a lot of things here. And actually, somebody just told me last night about that Netflix documentary, so I have got to watch it because you're like the second or third person to tell me about it. But for anybody who's been living under a rock for the last 10 years, just give me like the 2-sentence overview of the situation here about like what these companies are doing and how we're the product or however you want to frame the current environment.
Sure. So we got into this situation or mess, as I consider it, actually more than 10 years ago. It was really probably 20 years ago. And that's when Google, Facebook realized that the only way to monetize the activity that they were doing was through an advertising model. So if you went back 20 years, you can't say Google had came at this with evil intent. They didn't. They actually had noble intent. They were going to catalog the world's information and share it with the world. But they're a publicly held company and they have shareholders and they're held accountable. So monetization became a big word. And the only way to monetize all this data that Facebook and Google were collecting was an advertising model. They wanted to attract advertising to their platforms away from billboards, TV, radio. And lo and behold, wow, they're collecting all this data on individuals. And holy cow, instead of just throwing out a TV ad and hoping you get an ROI, they're promising now a targeted advertisement right at an individual. So that's really how we got into this, is that these companies, which maybe had noble intentions to begin with, are privately held companies and publicly held shareholders and have fiduciary responsibility, profitability. Monetization became the key word. Advertising was the way to do it. And now, 20 years later, they're inside us. They know us better than we know ourselves, is what you like to hear. And it's scary. And it's gone too far. And not surprisingly, it's now being used for bad actors have glommed onto the same technologies, have accessed the same data sets, and are using it for not so noble causes.
So let me ask you this. If bad actors weren't using these tools for not so noble causes, what's so wrong about me getting advertised products that I am probably interested in?
There's nothing wrong with it, and in fact, we did we did a lot of research at the beginning of ImagineBC, and we hired a market research company to actually ask that question, which is, first, do people mind being advertised to? And in our model, we want to compensate the individual for being monetized. So instead of Google and Facebook keeping the vast majority of the money, let's have the retailer, the advertiser, pay the consumer directly for the use of their information and their time. And in fact, the results we got were that we as humans don't mind being advertised to as long as two criteria are met. And those criteria are, first, the ad has to have value to me. And secondly, it can't be intrusive. So let's attack that first one. Yes, if you're using my data to send me something that's worthwhile, I'll find value in it. But I think we've all experienced this. I go looking for something online and I buy it. And now for the next 10 months, I'm bombarded with ads of the thing I just bought. Is that valuable to me anymore? No, it's not. But somebody's paying for that. I'm paying for it in time, and the advertiser is paying for it if I still click on it. Now, the second one, that one's really big because it's unbelievably intrusive now. You go to a health club, you come back and Facebook's texting you because they know you went to that health club. This is interfering in our privacy. So they are absolutely violating the second one dramatically, and they're on the cusp of completely violating the first one as well. So we don't mind being advertised to when we find value in it to it, but there has to be some dignity in it. And that's what ImagineBC is saying. Look, yes, your data is valuable. You should receive the vast majority of the compensation for that data, and it should be on your time frame when you want to participate.
So theoretically, I get the idea. Practically speaking, how does this work? Like do I go on eBay and sell my data?
No, you can't. No individual can do this independently, right? And people have tried, and it's impossible. And frankly, it's not about data privacy, it's about data control. We have to take responsibility for it. So what ImagineBC says is come to our platform, voluntarily put in as much data as you want about yourself. Now, remember, I just said a very key word there, voluntarily put in. We don't go scraping your sites and trying to figure out who you are from your Facebook and all your other social media. We'll do that if you allow us, but we don't do it without your permission to do so. So you voluntarily put in as much information about yourself as you like. Then we go looking for the market for your data, right? And we collect all of our members. And the more members we have, the more valuable the collective data becomes. When we find somebody interested in purchasing that data, we essentially make the deal, put the offer in front of you individually, and it says, look, this company would like to advertise to you. 30 seconds of your time to watch their ad, and they're willing to pay you 25 cents. Do you want to do it? If the answer is yes, you watch the ad, you get paid the 25 cents. Same thing, surveys, focus groups, offers, all of these things that are using our data follow that same model inside of our ecosystem. We find the market, we present our user with the opportunity, our user makes the decision of whether they want to participate or not.
So if I go on the website and I sign up and I put in my interests, right, I tell you that I'm interested in making videos and screenwriting and trail running and dogs, right? Like, this is who I am.
Yep.
Does it cost me anything to opt into your system?
No, totally free. And we're very transparent about this. So the way it works, so the next question would be then, how does ImagineBC make money, right? Let's do the two together. And because we're totally transparent about it. As I said, we built this on blockchain technology, and we have a blockchain smart contract that governs the distribution of income. So if a third party injects $1, let's say, into the ecosystem to advertise to Stephen, then Stephen, if you watch that advertisement, you're going to receive 70% of that. So you're going to receive 70 cents of that dollar. ImagineBC takes 10%. We always just take 10% of whatever the value is that was injected. The other 20% is then distributed back into the community based on who invited the advisor and who invited you, Stephen. So the person who invited you to the company used their intellectual property, which is their contact list, to get you into our community, so they get a pop as well. So that's how every penny, dollar, $10 is distributed in our system.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a devil's advocate question here. You mentioned that I voluntarily sign up on your site and give as much information as I'd like. But like when it comes to Facebook, aren't I voluntarily joining Facebook? You know,
No.
if I had, I'm not.
Well, let me take that back. You are voluntarily joining Facebook, but did you know they put bots onto your devices to gather information when you're not even interacting with Facebook?
I mean, maybe if I bothered to read all the legal language, but
okay. Again, I'm not saying what Facebook is doing is illegal. What I'm saying is that its time has come, and the issue is this: is that we now have 4 or 5 companies that are accumulating all the wealth of the world. This is a very bad model, and it is an extremely bad model for our democracy. So one of the reasons I started ImagineBC, it wasn't just I felt people needed to be monetized for their data. In fact, that's what has to happen because of the real fear I have. And the real fear I have is in AI and ML robotics. So what we're seeing under coronavirus and 22.5 million jobs gone because of this thing called the pandemic, that's temporary. You know, knock on wood, someday we'll be beyond it because we'll have a vaccine. But AI, ML, robotics, that's permanent. Those same service jobs that are gone now, restaurants, will be replaced by robots because it's just cheaper for me to do it. It's just cheaper for me to do it. As a businessman, I'm going to have a robot server because I don't have to pay health benefits. I don't have to pay, overtime. I don't have any of the worries. So we're going to see massive displacement of jobs in our economy. So I was a history major and I love history. And I know that if you have 22% unemployment, you have people in the streets with pitchforks. So we have to find ways to create new money for people because jobs as we've known them are going to be gone. Well, we have an amazing pot of money sitting there, and that's called the money from my personal data. So if Facebook tomorrow would adopt ImagineBC's model, ImagineBC would be dead. To be honest, it would be gone. But Facebook's not going to do that. They're a publicly held company. They can't give away 90% of their revenue. They're just not going to do that. And it's not in their DNA now to do that. They kill companies, right? That's why they're being talked about having to be broken up, anti-monopoly, right? So it takes companies like mine that has a social conscience that says, look, we're not going into this to rule in the world and be masters of the universe. We're going into this because if companies like us don't come along, we have much bigger problems than did I share my data or not share my data. So, yes, long answer to your question, but sure, but it's a much bigger picture you have to look at to say, look, we've got to get this money being redistributed back to the people whose data is being used. It's fair and it's necessary.
So I imagine most people are pretty on board with the idea of getting paid for their data, especially if the cost of signing up to your platform, the time cost is like minimal.
Right.
Where are you seeing friction in terms of like trying to grow this company or bring in partners? Like what obstacles are you hitting in sort of this new thinking around personal data?
There's two. One is it's fairly decently documented. It's called the privacy paradox. And you kind of touched on it, Stephen, which is if you survey people, and in fact, there was a recent survey published in Axios that said 93% of all Americans would prefer to work with companies that protected their data. Well, that sounds like ImagineBC, right? Why don't we get all 93% of Americans signing up? Why aren't they cutting the cord with Facebook? That's the privacy paradox. Yes, I would like to have privacy, but I'm not willing to give up yet. So on these other social medias that I'm so used to using, and I don't see the harm yet. I've not personally been harmed yet. It's coming, but I haven't been personally harmed yet. So, where we resonate with people who absolutely get it, want to be involved, see us as the movement we think we are, and come in. So that's number one. It's the privacy paradox. Then the second is the chicken and the egg. So we're not, as I said early on, it's not just about personal data for us. It's also about creativity. The YouTube model is also a vicious model. Now, almost 60 years old. So I lived before 2000. I was a professional before 2000. And in that time frame, nobody ever gave their intellectual property away for nothing. It just didn't exist. If I had something of value, somebody paid me for it. How YouTube, and now Google, who owns YouTube, got away with this, I have no idea. Good on them for making it happen. But they've convinced everybody, you give us your intellectual property for nothing. And if we think there's value to it, we'll send you a check. I mean, and what's so interesting, Stephen, is I get this through to people by going, look, if you came and interviewed for a job with me, and my response at the end of the interview was, Stephen, I love you. I want you to start on Monday. And you're going to work a 40-hour week, and every Friday, I'm going to decide how much I want to pay you. And let me be honest with you. Most of the time, it's going to be nothing. Right? Are you going to work for me? No. But these YouTubers are working for YouTube. YouTube makes $19 billion. The YouTubers barely make anything, most of them. So that model also. And we make the two to work together, right? So I'm used to getting all this content for free. That has to stop. So if we can get your personal data making money, then we hope you'll use part of that new money you're making from your personal data to start paying these people who are putting valuable content out there, fair value for their content, just like you're now receiving fair value for your data. And then it begins to move around. And you've got a much better model because everybody's making fair value for either their personal data or their intellectual property. And now you can start to see we may have new jobs created. And remember what I said, that we have to find new jobs, new incomes, new ways for technology to create money for people. So
then as far as like the YouTuber goes, then I guess you'd be more of an advocate of, I don't know are you familiar with the site Patreon? Where like,
oh yeah, sure. Yeah, very much so. Yep.
Like models like that, where like you subscribe essentially to get the content.
Yeah, Patreon is good. I mean, I would say, people ask who your competitors. I say on that part of our model, Patreon is a competitor. The differentiators are with Patreon, I always have to go into my wallet to pay for that content, where we're helping our member make money from their personal data, which they'll hopefully barter. So I haven't had to go into my wallet to use money. I'm using the money my data's created for the content. And then secondly, Patreon, you sign up for Patreon, they don't do anything to help you market yourself. We do. So we help all of our content partners market themselves because, and I'll be honest, when we first started, we didn't think we were going to do that. But what we found out pretty quick was these people are great at creating content, but most don't know how to market themselves in a digital world. So we provide that service to ours, which Patreon doesn't do. You're just one of many on Patreon.
Right, especially if you're not on YouTube, where YouTube's going to suggest your video to people. There's got to be other ways to build visibility.
Right. And the other difference is, I think if you ask Patreon, they would say they're a technology platform. We've made the commitment that we're a media platform. Where Facebook and Google haven't admitted that, the revenue comes from advertising, and that advertising comes from people watching content on their platform, media company. They won't admit it. We are admitting it. We're a media company. So again, unlike Patreon, we're just not going to let everybody on our platform. We have a responsibility to watch the content. Now, that doesn't mean in this very bipartisan world we live in that we're going to let Republicans no, that's not. What we're saying is you can't yell fire in a movie theater, right? You can't use the platform to incite a riot. It's an open, fair First Amendment platform, but we have a responsibility to ensure it's not being used for nefarious means. We, as a media company, we have that responsibility.
Great. So getting back to the data privacy concerns and people individually monetizing their data, one thing that comes up a lot of times in this discussion is the idea that I opt into a mailing list or something for company A, and then they turn around to sell to company B. So what safeguards do you have in place that if I opt into your system and I elect to sell my data to somebody, like they don't run off and do something else with it?
Good question. And the answer to that is that we go to fairly great lengths to protect all of our members' anonymity, including from ourselves. So within our system, except for a 48-hour period where we do basically a KYC, know your customer. After that, we destroy your personal information and only you have control over it. So we only know you as a code attached to demographic information. So there's no value for me to sell that to a campaign because they're not going to be able to target you. There's no email addresses. I can't give a phone number out. I can't give an address out. We don't have it. And I can tell you we don't have it because told me we don't have it. And they had to write our terms and conditions because we don't have that information. That's a big difference, right? So, I mean, that's from a security point of view. Even if anybody could get through our blockchain network, it's unlikely, but it wouldn't matter. They're not going to find anything of any value. They're not going to find you.
Great. All right. So let's say I'm convinced I want to sell my data and be compensated for it. What do I do next? Where do I go?
You'd just go to www.imaginebc.net. Being a good member in our society, in our system, means one is provide some, as much personal data about yourself. If you don't give us anything, we can't do anything for you. Right? So you have to decide how much personal data you'd like to provide about yourself. Start small, go larger as you get comfortable, and also look through our content library and see if there's any content you're interested in, and purchase some of that content so we can get this thing moving around. The more content we have, the more people, the more content, and the ecosystem. And when that grows, then you get more advertisers in. That means you have more dollars to share amongst everybody. So it just comes down to go to our site, click on register, and there you have it.
Beyond signing up for your platform and getting involved this way, given the discussions and the regulation proposals, what else can people do to sort of get towards your vision of the world here?
Certainly, we'd love everybody to sign up for ImagineBC, but in fact, we'd like you to sign up for ImagineBC and then even go even further, because it's necessary to do that right now, to send a message to folks on the Hill that this is an extremely important topic. So a couple of areas we'd love the listener, the viewer, to take a look at is follow Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator from New York. She's gone ahead and drafted a pretty interesting piece of legislation called the Data Protection Act, which proposes a data protection agency, which, when we looked at it, was the best neutral legislation being proposed on the Hill right now. So we're very strong proponents of that. And also, there's another group who we're involved with called Radical Exchange, and they've drafted another piece of legislation called the Data Freedom Act. And they also get it. And they're proponents of data unions. So in fact, they see ImagineBC as one of many data unions. So from what I've said, you can see ImagineBC is focused on a direct model where we want to get you compensated for watching ads at focus groups. But there's a tremendous amount of personal data that you'll be generating that isn't direct. For example, with 5G technology and the Internet of Things, when you combine those, there'll be sensors on virtually everything. So when you're in your car, you'll be producing data. When you move, when you breathe, it will be producing data. And that's not necessarily data that somebody's going to advertise to you about, but it could be very valuable data to civic organizations, to corporations trying to determine if I build a site someplace. So this is indirect value to data. So there are other organizations. There's an organization like Streamer creating a data union who we're partnered with, where we'll be able to put data sets up on there, get value for your data, and return it to you. So definitely check out Senator Gillibrand, check out Radical Exchange, and check out Streamer. All very interesting in this data privacy world and the concept of being monetized for one's information.
Erik, a fascinating discussion, a really interesting solution that's just not like regulation or laws, but actually trying to bring a better product to market. Fascinating. I'll definitely check it out. So yeah, thank you so much for the discussion and for your time today.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
For more on data privacy,
there's no way we can push AI further if we don't have access to data and if we don't have people participating in these systems. As a result, we're going to have more tension between data privacy and AI. If we really want to push AI, we're going to have to potentially compromise on privacy.
be sure to check out episode 11, where Forbes Technology Council member Jedediah Ewa discusses data privacy with a Google data scientist. Well, that's all we have for today. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This has been Inside Forbes Councils. Please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a member of the Forbes Councils and would like to participate in our podcast series, please email your member concierge. If you're interested in joining a Forbes Council, learn more at ForbesCouncils.com.